Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Tack-a-lack.
Huh? What's tack?
I didn't say tack. You said tack.
No, you definitely
I'm going to kill you.
Oh, okay. This intro took a turn. I felt like I needed to put that in there, but I didn't realize when it's said out loud what it means. This week on the show, after 5 months on one single book, we are finally ready to jump into a new one. We are heading into the roaring 90s. What do we call the 90s?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like a term for them?
This is the decade of good movies. I don't know.
Begin our 11-part journey with Stephen King's Desperation. This week, the first 3 chapters of the novel as we meet our cast of characters as they get taken by a crazed cop into the titular town of Desperation. Matt, well, we're going to talk about it for the next 2 hours, but what'd you think of the opening salvo of this novel?
That's a good term for it, salvo. I've been having a great time with this book. I've really enjoyed it. I'm really glad you picked this one. I've been excited about this book literally just because I know nothing about it, which is pretty rare. And so I'm really enjoying the unfolding of what we're getting ourselves into here. Really having fun.
No, that's cool. This is I didn't pick this book thinking, oh, this is one that he's probably never going to have heard of before. But that, I mean, certainly true, right? That like this is in the list of, King things that have deeply affected pop culture. I don't think you would find Desperation. So you do get to enter this one, unlike it before it, with basically no knowledge of what this book is, what it's going to be doing, any of that stuff. And that's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
All right, so let's get into it. Before we do that, just another quick announcement. A couple, actually. The first is that we have our new episode of Other Levels of the Tower live on our Patreon account right now. We took a look at Salem's Lot, the 1989 adaptation of Stephen King's novel Salem's Lot. Jesus, Pet Cemetery. I'm all over the place, man.
I was like, don't remember doing
that. I
that.
confused Matt so much. He was like, did we talk? I don't remember.
It's possible.
We talked about the 1989 adaptation of Stephen King's Pet Cemetery, one of the darkest, most disturbing King novels, made into a disturbing movie, but also a silly movie.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. That's true.
So check out that episode if you're a patron. If you're not a patron, it's a great time to do it. It joins the 36 episodes of Other Levels of the Tower we've done since we started that show. So there's 36 bonus episodes available to you right now on our Patreon account. It's patreon.com/doofmedia. You can check all those out. And I think we're going to be bringing Other Levels of the Tower to an end here pretty soon. We talked about this on the show, but we're running out of things to do. But Matt and I had a conversation last night after we recorded that episode, and we have plans for other bonus things, so we're not going anywhere with the bonus content. Yeah.
In fact, it'll be better than ever.
Yeah, there you go. I like it. We don't know that for a fact, but we would hope so.
For sure. Totally will be better than ever.
The other thing we just wanted to say is the tickets for our Bangor live event are still on sale right now. As we said last week, the tickets to the tour have sold out. Unfortunately, all the tour packages, but we still do have plenty of tickets to the live event in Bangor on Saturday, June the 15th. So if you want to stop by for that, travel to Bangor, do the tour on your own on some other days, and then join everyone for the live event on Saturday, you certainly can still do that. There's still plenty of tickets. So head to doofmedia.com/kingslingers live and check out all the details there.
Sounds good.
Okay, Matt, let's do it. Let's get into it. Let's get into the 1990s, the booming, the roaring, the super 90s.
Supercharged.
There we go. Supercharged 90s, the decade of growth and the decade of our growth, as this was the one where you and I really stopped being little kids and started to become little teenagers.
That's right. Yeah.
In the 1990s, King writes 12 novels, one of which, Insomnia, we've already covered in season 2, and 2 of which are Of course, some great ones from our Dark Tower series. The Wastelands coming out in the very beginning of the decade, and Wizard and Glass coming near the end of it. King also wrote 3 short story collections during this decade. And of course, the big thing that happened in the 90s is in 1999, King had a run-in with a van that leaves him almost dead. But we're not here in this section to talk about that accident yet. I think that'll come in the 2000s, maybe. We're here to talk about 90s King. And 90s King it's just, Matt, it's so fun. It's so interesting. I'm so looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm interested as well. I don't have, I feel like I get, I feel like I get our previous decades of King. I feel like I understand where his head was at, but I really don't feel like I understand where his head was at in the 90s.
Sure.
Looking forward
To set the stage for us a little bit, the 90s are the first the first decade in which King is entirely sober. He got sober at the very end of the 1980s. And he spends the basically this entire decade sober. Needful Things has the distinction of being the first book that he wrote after getting sober. And, when you look at Needful Things as a book, I've always personally felt that it was kind of a novel in which he's perhaps testing the waters. Like it feels like a book that's very vintage King in like all the best way. We return to the town of Castle Rock. We return to examining the dynamics and kind of the rot at the root of small towns. These are things that King has done many times throughout his career. And it feels like a Needful Things he's going back to that core, almost as if like to test, hey, can I still do this? Like, there's always this frankly silly but understandable fear that I think artists who also have substance abuse problems think is like, oh, maybe this is where it comes from. It comes from my being drunk or on drugs or what have you. And so they think when they quit those things, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose whatever this nebulous thing is. And so I don't know. I don't know if you agree with me on this. I know Needful Things has a distinction of being the first King book you read, but it always seemed to me as like that kind of testing the waters, just doing what I do best just to see if I can still do it type of book.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I certainly didn't think of it that way because I didn't really ever realize that it was his sort of first book that he wrote fully sober. I hear what you're saying, where it's almost like he's taken all these thematic ideas that he's attacked in previous books and wrapping them all up together because it's a space where he's comfortable, I think.
Yeah.
And I think, the book itself is about sort of compulsive wants and compulsive behaviors and people being driven by their compulsions, which is probably something he was thinking a lot about at the time.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So that is fascinating.
But from Needful Things, I think King moves on to spend a lot, if not most of this decade, really kind of experimenting. One of the things I keep thinking about is the fact that, King is 43 going into this decade. He's 53 leaving it. It seems to me like perhaps the decade of midlife crisis in that I think he's really looking and examining at the stories he's told and the writer he's been up until this point and saying, I really want to explore and play with the format of a novel, play with the things that I'm interested in doing, like doing all this stuff, we get in 1992, the 1-2 punch of Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne. These are 2 books that take place on the same lake and circle around the same solar eclipse as this really impactful event of the novel. And they're 2 books that both deal with abused women and how they either, fight back against or overcome their abuse. Gerald's Game. You watched the Flanagan film. So that's a book that takes place entirely within one bedroom, with basically one character. And then Dolores Claiborne is a book that is an entire novel that is just one side of a police interview, Dolores' side as she's being interviewed by the police. So, messing with format, covering things he's not covered before. In 1994, we get Insomnia, which is not specifically about abuse per se, but I think abuse features pretty prominently in that novel. It's a pretty big part of it. And then in 1995, we get the novel Rose Madder, which is a book that I think was originally in King's mind supposed to be part of this Eclipse trilogy that he started with Dolores Claiborne and Gerald's Game. It's not that, but it is a story about a woman escaping an abusive husband who is also a cop. There's another connection to the book we're covering today, and her trying to start a new life. So I think it's safe to say like that domestic abuse against women was a thing in the 90s that was very much on King's mind. And it's because of that I almost picked one of those books. Like I really almost picked Rose Madder as the book for this decade. It's a book that I enjoy. I think it's pretty good, and I think it serves as kind of like the culmination of King's exploration into the horrors of domestic abuse. That book, it's just strange. It's a strange novel. It's disturbing. It's kind of wonderful. So I almost picked it, but Matt, there's another book. There's another experiment that King does here in the 90s that I think is one of my favorite things he does.
Okay,
and that is Desperation and The Regulators. Both of these novels were released in 1996, the latter of which is under his Richard Bachman pen name. And when you look at the covers of these two novels, and I've conveniently put them here in the script for you, Matt, there's something connecting the two of them.
Well, there's a dog-like creature. I see.
Well, the covers of the books like sync up to each other, Matt.
Yeah.
Like you see the smoke in the background.
Yeah.
You see the cactus. They sync up to each other.
Yeah, it's a painting that's been cut in half and spread across the covers of two books. Yes.
So obviously we can't get into like what the connection, like what are the connections between these two novels. We can't do that yet. We can't talk about that yet, but I love it. I love like the cheekiness of this idea. I love the idea that like Richard Bachman is a thing that people have known about King for at this point, like over a decade. Like I'm pretty sure the Bachman books are out now, which is like a big collection that says Stephen King writing as Richard Bachman. It's not like Bachman isn't a known quantity for anyone that will be buying these books, but just like to have this idea and do it this way, I think is so fun. And I know this, Matt, because I don't know if I've talked about this on this show before, actually. Richard Bachman's The Regulators was the first Stephen King book I ever read.
Oh my God.
I don't know if you knew that.
I don't remember hearing that. That's
yeah.
I think I would have remembered that if you told me that, because that's pretty strange, actually.
Yeah. So basically, my dad, they got these two books when they came out. My dad showed me the covers put together, and little 11-year-old me just thought that was like the coolest thing ever. Like I thought it was so neat, and so I was like, I'm gonna read that because the covers are neat. And I picked the shorter of the two because Desperation's a pretty thick book. Regulators is much shorter, so I picked the shorter of the two, and I read that, and it was. Well, we'll talk about The Regulators, but it was enough to kind of get me hooked on King. I read Desperation, not right away after, but later. But the point of this whole thing is the entire reason this podcast exists is because Stephen King thought it would be funny to write two sort of connected novels and then give them matching covers. Like that's the whole reason this whole thing exists.
Yeah, it's funny. I know that you've said like that's one of the only molecules of information I know about Desperation is that it's somewhat related to this other book called The Regulators. So I also know nothing about The Regulators, and I know nothing about the way in which they're connected. So I'm just like, okay, cool. Gotcha.
That's so fun. That's so fun. We're gonna have fun with it. It's a really fun little experiment. It's really great, and I can't wait to really dive into all the ways in which they're connected with you. I do think Desperation, of these two books, Desperation is the superior of the two novels. It is a book that I am kind of endlessly fascinated about outside of the gimmick. I think the gimmick is cool, and the gimmick is part of the reason why we're going to be talking about it. But the theme of this novel and what I think it's doing, I think are some of my favorite things. I don't, this is the part where this job is hard, Matt, because like, I want to explain to you in the audience why I picked this book right here at the beginning, but I also don't, because I want you to just like, that would be like me saying, here's what the book is about. And I don't want to do that yet. I want to hold off on that until, the theme starts to reveal itself in this novel, and then we can start to talk about it. And it hasn't done that in these first three chapters, I think. So
yeah. I mean, I think the nature of the book so far, as we're going to talk about today, is actually that it is keeping itself mysterious on purpose. So, I think we should avoid letting me in on the secret so far.
Yeah, I do think you'll figure it out pretty quickly, though.
Yeah.
So it's a cool gimmick. It's a neat thing that he did. It's a fun thing to talk about, and it's a really interesting, fascinating book and an exploration of some stuff that I think we're going to have a lot of time really getting into. So that's at the end of the day the reason why this novel and this group of novels was selected here.
Yeah, cool. I mean, it sounds like a fun change of pace to dig into these interesting, different Stephen King books.
Yeah, and perhaps underappreciated. We could say that.
Sure.
Because not a lot of people talk about these books. I think they're kind of been lost in the shuffle of and when you have 70 something books, it's easy for books to get lost, even good ones. So I'm channeling our friend Kim with the underrated Stephen King podcast here, and we're gonna have some. I think this book's underrated. I think.
Has there been a adaptation of either of these?
They made a straight to TV movie in 2006 for Desperation. I actually have never seen it. So we are going to be covering that film on this show, but I've not seen it. So
okay.
I have no idea. I guess it's not that good, or I feel like I would have made more time for it earlier in my life, but
okay. Yeah. I was just wondering like how thoroughly overlooked by civilization, but
not completely. But definitely I think underappreciated. And that's so. Speaking of which, that's kind of the plan for. So if we're looking at our schedule for the next few months, we've got 8 episodes we're going to cover on this novel. Then we're going to have our usual like overall discussion episode, wrapping it all up. Then we're going to take a look at the 2006 film we just referenced there, and then because we have to, we are going to do one and only one episode on Stephen King's The Regulators. And that's because, like I said, I think it's the worst of the 2 books, and I don't want to stretch the season out more than it is already and do like weeks and weeks and weeks of The Regulators. I think it's worth talking about, especially in the reference to, how these books connect and what that gimmick is and how it works. It needs to be discussed, and I want to do it. But I don't think it needs to be covered over more than one episode. So basically the plan is, once we finish Desperation, we're going to have about 2.5 weeks before we need to record the episode on Regulators. So we are just going to have to really, really, really dive into that book and get it all done in time for that episode, Matt. It might be too ambitious of a plan, but I think we can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it actually sounds like a fun change of pace to sort of cover that book in a different way, more like our regular book clubs over on the Doofcast.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it as well. I'm looking forward to talking to you about the first King novel I ever read. It's the weirdest story. Like no one, like that's never the first. That's never. I might be the only person in the world whose first King novel is The Regulators.
Okay, well that sounds great. Yeah, I mean it's funny because you have constantly just mocked me for reading Needful Things as my first King novel, but like you just said a minute ago, Needful Things gives you a pretty decent sense of the kinds of stuff that King likes to do. So it's not like it's not like it's a bad introduction to King. It's just not one of his most well-liked novels is all. So
yeah, I mean I mock out of insecurity basically.
Yes.
At the truth of my King existence.
I see. So you've just been dreading the day when we would all find out.
When I would all just openly tell people. The thing about this is though, like I honestly don't have good memory of like when I read which King books, like I know I've read them all, and I know I read it when I was a kid, but like I'm guessing around 13. It was definitely after I read The Regulators. But I just don't remember. So I'm very bad at this whole, what was your Stephen King origin story thing that our friends at the Kingcast ask. Like if I was asked that question, I would tell this story about The Regulators, but I'm not even 100% sure where this lines up with all the other books.
Sure. Yeah, I would fail a similar test regarding my childhood reading habits, I'm sure. So
all right. So let's move into Desperation then. Let's talk about Desperation, a book that I think perfectly encapsulates what the 1990s and Stephen King were all about. It's not a perfect book. I struggled to think if this would go into my like top 10 Stephen King books, but it's one that I really do enjoy, and I am looking forward to talking to you about it. So let's do it.
All right.
All right. The book begins with a quote, as most Stephen King books do. This one is from Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses, and it simply says, "The landscape of his poetry was still the desert." What could it mean, Matt? What could it mean?
What could it mean? We did read the Satanic Verses over on Book Club.
We did
a few years ago, and that is very interesting book. I you know, if you just take it literally, it's just it's going to be about the desert. It's going to be about the desert and writing poetry. No, not literally, but it is. I mean, it is interesting how the setting does really emphasize the idea of the desert as this just oppressive, sort of inhospitable, just terrible place, actually.
Yeah. And weird, uncomfortable,
Yeah.
unsettling place for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we move into part 1. This book, like many King books, is divided into parts. And for the next 2 weeks, we will be covering part 1. It's 5 chapters. We'll be doing 3 this week, 2 next week. But part 1 is titled Highway 50 in the House of the Wolf, the House of the Scorpion. And Matt, I just want to get your in the immediate reaction to the name of that part and what it tends to indicate to you on what's going on here in this book.
Well, I mean, you think of the desert as being the house of the scorpion in a sense. The house of the wolf to some degree. I don't really think of the desert as being a place where wolves are, but definitely
we've got the coyotes we see in this week's reading.
Yeah, you do get the coyotes. So coyotes and scorpions are for sure things you expect to find in the desert. Aside from that, I mean, I definitely got some heavy Midworld vibes, some heavy Crimson King vibes from this title, and I'd say that genuinely. I had that feeling just from the title before we even got some of the later, more midworldy sort of language things that our villains start saying. So I felt kind of gratified that I had caught on to the vibe, assuming I'm understanding that correctly. But yeah, it feels very midworld to me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too when you think about the fact that the Wastelands and Wizard and Glass are books written in a similar time frame of this one. That like he was in this kind of phase in his career when he really started putting specifics to the mythos and world that is Midworld in the Dark Tower novels. So
yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense that there's a feeling of similarity there for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into chapter 1. And Matt, oh my gosh, like say what you will about this book as a whole, and I think there's people out there that don't like this book very much, but this first chapter, holy shit, how this book starts. Like this entire first chapter is just this like wonderful, perfect examination of tension and anxiety, and like just culminating in this really great, shocking moment where our perceived protagonist is just murdered. And I don't know, man, like there's so many good first chapters out there, but this is certainly one of the best.
100%. These 3 chapters that we're going to talk about today are basically just King saying, like, what if I just push the tension and anxiety to the maximum possible extent, and then I just try to keep it there for as long as I possibly can. This chapter, of course, being just a delightful kind of kick in the pants to get you going. One thing I was thinking about, we spent a bit, earlier talking about like our King history, and I was thinking while I started reading this book, like this is kind of who I thought Stephen King was before I started reading Stephen King. Like before I had read more than scraps of his work anyway, I was like, yeah, people say he's the master of horror. To me, that means like relentless tension, unflinching, horrible shit happening to our characters. That's kind of what I thought horror was. And I was just kind of unsophisticated and hadn't really consumed a lot of it. But what's funny is like this is the book so far in the first 3 chapters that has been the closest to what I always thought of as just like pure horror, where it's just trying to push you,
Yeah.
So I'm enjoying that. I'm almost like, there he is. There's the King I thought was in there somewhere, which is funny because it's like there was no reason to believe that this was what was going to be hiding in there. But yeah, anyway, I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
No, that's really fascinating to me. And I think you're right in that this does kind of in my eye, most closely match like the common conception of king. And I wonder if that's because this was the time of our lives, like we said, in 1996 when this book came out, we were 11. We were just starting to like notice and pay attention to things. And so this time and the few years after it is really when like our idea of pop culture started to crystallize a little bit. And so I wonder if it's just because like this was the time that started to crystallize, that this was the thing that became associated, like that this book and the writing he was doing in this time frame is what people were talking about when they talked about Stephen King, and it's the thing we noticed or were around, and so it became the thing we thought King was.
Maybe, yeah, that's really interesting thought. I'd have to think back and figure out, you know, where a sort of impression like that comes from. That's an interesting possibility. Yeah.
I don't know. So we meet Peter and Mary Jackson, a couple driving from Washington State all the way back to New York. They're currently in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, and I love the way King depicts this place. Right, you know, these two New York City slickers, and they're just uncomfortable here, right? Like Mary is looking around and asking the question, like, why are they here? Why does anyone live here? And Peter is just like looking at the sky and is like, there's too much of this. I don't like it. I just love the way King depicts the setting. You know, we talked in it a lot about how we got an idea of what Derry was almost immediately, and here we get this automatic emotion about the desert and the place, and it just I don't know, man, it just like immediately has character.
Yeah, I agree. I love the tone setting here. It really feels like there's an ability King I think gets better at over time, which is saying more with less, which is sort of the quality that any master of craft has, is they, you know, they can evoke an even stronger image with even fewer lines. And that's I think, you know, the biggest difference between your Salem's Lot and this book is just like sort of sparser, simpler prose, actually, while actually affecting you more. And sure. I think that's just generally been the trend as we've gone through the decades. And I can kind of reference my memories of the Dark Tower books, and I feel like the same is true trend wise across the Dark Tower books as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's a shame that Peter Jackson will never get to direct Lord of the Rings, because he's going to be shot by this cop in a few minutes. But I also, you know, speaking of just deft introductions, I really love the characterization of these two characters in such short order, so efficiently. The same I think can be said of every character that's introduced in these chapters, but I think that this first chapter is particularly strong because he knows this is the beginning of the book. He's got to hook you. He's got to reel you in. So yeah, this is great.
Yeah, and he's kind of playing with you a bit. Like, this guy's set up to be our protagonist in a lot of ways, right? And so he's characterizing him as if he's going to be the guy leading us through the rest of this novel, which of course we learn pretty quickly is not true. Yep. I do love the depiction of the two of them, especially Mary, like looking around this place and being like, who the fuck lives here? Because like, I feel like if you've ever like taken a long drive through America, any part of America really, and you get to like the parts of America that are just in the middle of nowhere, and then like you see like a house or like a little group of houses or something, and you're just like, who are the, like, who lives, what is your job, where do you go to work? And it's like this really, and of course that's a very close-minded and very urban opinion I have of how the world works, and I think that's the same with Peter and Mary here as well. But it is a relatable thing of like, I wonder like, who are the people that live here in this place?
Yeah, and I think there is a kind of vague anxiety around it too. Like I agree with you. It used to happen to me all the time. I would go on these multi-hour drives across Texas between the major cities in Texas. I used to do it pretty frequently. And you know, you'd go through some little town, and I would often feel like a sincere urge to stop my car and maybe poke around maybe like oh, there's like a shop. Like what's in it? Like what kind of shop is this? Why is there a shop here? Who shops at this shop? There's no houses around here. Like what, it's a mystery, right? And the thing is, I never really did, unless I had an excuse, like I had to get gas or something. I never really would stop at these towns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I honestly, in retrospect, I don't think I was honest with myself about this at the time, but in retrospect, I think there was a kind of anxiety about the idea of like, you don't really know what you're getting into. Like
Yeah.
you don't know how you're going to be perceived if you're obviously, at the time I'd be some, young college kid, trouncing around their town, like and again, I don't think I verbalized these thoughts to myself, but I think I felt this sense of like, I will not be welcome here. This is not a thing I should do, and I never actually, no matter how curious I was about what was in that shop, I would never actually go check. And I just think that's an interesting thing. I never really thought about that until you prompted me with this book. But yeah, I think the point being, King really connects to, I think, a lot of these feelings that we all have when we're traveling across these wide open spaces.
No, totally. I mean, that's kind of, the conclusion that Peter and Mary come to here is that this place is weird, and all these people must be weird, and just it just builds this weird, strange people. I think the first thing we see in this story is a dead cat nailed to a speed limit sign. We can kind of guess, I think, at this point, who was responsible for that one, right? But at the time, it's just this feeling of all these people in this unknown situation with all these strange people in it, and that is kind of the mood that we're being delivered unto as we move into the actual action of the series.
Yep.
So we're in a story, though, so we can't just hang out in mood for a while, and then so something needs to happen, and something does happen. Peter sees in his rear view a car gaining on them quickly. Turns out it's a police car, and again, I think you said King is channeling this general anxiety of like traveling across the country and being in these strange new places. This is, I think, him very perfectly channeling the very relatable anxiety of being on the road, driving on a highway and seeing a cop car, and just like, are they going to pull me over? Was I speeding? What's going to happen? Just perfectly captures this where you kind of just sit up in your seat a little bit, maybe clench a little bit, get a little nervous, your heart rate picks up a little bit, and it's just perfect.
Yeah, 100%. That's in fact, I think that's the button that he's going to push over and over throughout these chapters is your a latent fear of the cops. I think this is something that he understands pretty well. I was thinking earlier when you were talking about domestic violence, and I was thinking about how like domestic violence is a sort of subset of the idea of a strong person who has been given authority and who is now abusing that authority, which is also what a violent, brutal cop is. I think there's a conceptual relationship between an abusive husband and a cop who's abusing his power. I just kind of wanted to pull that out.
No, I think I completely agree. That's great, excellent point. It is this idea of a thing that is supposed to represent safety and orderly, goodness, and it is ultimately corrupting that thing. And King knows what he's doing here, right? Like, absolutely knows what he's doing, taking the image of a police officer that should represent this image of order, of justice, of safety, and corrupting it into this horrible thing. It makes total sense,
especially in contrast with his notion of a gunslinger, which is someone who's been given authority and is, basically deserving of that authority. So I think these are all ideas that are throughout his stuff. So I look forward to the opportunity to talk about this particular really egregious example.
Yeah, no, I agree. We do see here that this cop car is behaving a little unusually, though, Matt, because after passing Pete up, he starts slowing down and slowing down and slowing down. And of course, Pete adjusts by slowing down himself because he doesn't want to pass the cop car, which is, I think, another really relatable thing. Like, you never want to drive past a cop car, right?
Yep.
And so like even if they're going 10 miles an hour under the speed limit, you kind of just match their speed because you feel like you have to.
Yeah.
And it's another perfect, just capturing this perfectly. I don't know. It's you're immediately into this book because it's like all these things are so relatable. I'm so into this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's especially funny. This is one of the great things about doing this podcast is the opportunity to go back and think over these things sort of a second time, because at the time, when you read this first, you're just with the characters, so you're like, what the hell's going on? Like, what is this? You're like sharing their fear, uncertainty, and anxiety about what's happening, and you're totally in their perspective.
Sure.
But now going through it the second time, knowing kind of what's going to happen and who this guy is somewhat, you're like, okay, he's actually just enjoying screwing with them, and like there's no greater purpose of this. He's just rattling their cage, and he's sort of softening him up for the next the next step, and he seems to be enjoying every part of this.
Oh yeah, no, he really is. That is what's absolutely wonderful, and that's we're going to get into it. This week features a lot of 3 beats, right? We do things 3 times in these 3 chapters, and I think that's all intentional. That the first time we get to live in the anxiety, and the other times we get to see a little bit more specifically what the characters are doing now that we don't necessarily have that same tension and anxiety.
Yeah, yeah.
So we get to meet our scary cop, and as he steps out of the car, we get this wonderful written paragraph. He was looking in the outside mirror. Above the words, "Caution, objects may be closer than they appear," he saw the dusty white driver's door of the cop car swing open. A khaki leg swung out. It was prodigious. As the man it belonged to followed it out, swung the door of his cruiser closed, and settled his smoky bear hat on his head. He wouldn't have been wearing it in the car, Peter supposed, and not enough clearance. Mary turned around to look. Her mouth dropped ajar. It's like the perfect introduction of this guy, Matt. The perfect introduction of our so far unnamed psycho murder cop as this huge 6'7", 300-pound man that is a monster. But we don't actually know that this cop is a bastard yet. So he just comes off as just a really, really large man.
Yeah, I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, it never quite says whether he's large in the sense of being overweight or large in the sense of being just muscular. It's like, no, he's just very large in in an undefined sense, which somehow manages to be even more like intimidating. But yeah. So speaking of this idea where we don't know that this cop is a bad dude yet, I wanted to. I wasn't sure where to say this exactly, but I guess I'll just say it here as he's introduced. I found it weirdly hard to dislike him. Like objectively, obviously he's a horrific, murderous villain. He's a very bad dude. But like the character on the page has this ability to flip back to being warm and charming and personable and reasonable. And it happens over and over. And it's kind of amazing how, you're trying to figure out like what is his deal, what's wrong with him, who is this guy, and there's some part of your brain, and I think this might literally have to do with the fact that like authority figures are given a kind of leeway where you're like, what could be an excuse for his behavior?
Sure.
Is he just like a normal guy who's being intermittently possessed by some outside force? And it's almost like my brain's trying to come up with some kind of story that makes it not his fault. Like, and isn't this weird? Like, I'm saying this all aware of how weird this sounds, but like, I just want to, like, I've never felt this way about like a Randall Flagg character. Like when Randall Flagg is introduced, he's a piece of shit, and then he's often manipulative, and he can kind of turn on this like Randall Flagg charm, but it's like a smarmy, slick charm that never makes him likable even for a second. Whereas this character, who as you say is unnamed, I like, there's just something about him that I have a hard time hating, and I find that so weird.
So here's what I'll say. I haven't seen the film that we're going to watch eventually, but the cop character is played by Ron Perlman. If that, I think, tells you kind of the mood that you're supposed to feel with him, that he's like scary, but in like a way that you can't help but enjoy. I mean, that's, Ron Perlman is fucking fantastic, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
And he's perfect at that very specific thing. So
Yeah.
I don't think you're wrong in feeling that way. I mean, there is like, he's kind of funny.
Yeah.
He's weird in a like, outside of all the horrifying moments, he's weird in a kind of a delightful way sometimes. And
Right.
so it is this kind of push and pull. And by the way, I do think this speaks to, I think both you and I are generally pretty like deferential to authority in our lives. And so like, I think there are people reading this book that come at cop characters with much like more immediate distrust and uncertainty than I think you and I would, right?
Yeah.
Just like different people have different experiences with police, right? And it allows them to inform how they treat police. And I have not gotten to experience things like that, and I am in general like a respects authority to the point of a absurdist person. And so like when I see cop, I'm generally like, oh, authority figure, I'll do what they say. Like they're probably going to be trustworthy. Like that is my initial reaction, right? And so I think you do give this guy a little bit more than he might be worth sometimes, just because of that general idea.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and I also really like what you said about him being kind of funny, because like Randall Flagg, I'm just picking another common sort of king villain archetype. Like Flagg can be funny, but never like in a way that makes me laugh funny. Whereas like when this guy said, "You're an organ donor, do you think that's wise?" I just thought that was funny. Like I just legitimately thought that was funny. And then it makes it hard to dislike a guy who you think is funny. I think that's just true.
And to be clear here, I don't think you're saying like, man, I'd love to like hang out with this guy. It's just like as a moment of like appreciation for the entertainment value a character brings you to a story. I think there's no one more entertaining in the early parts of the story than this cop.
Right. Yeah. And really, ultimately, I'm just interrogating what I see as my own strange reaction to this character. So.
Yeah. And again, that's me too. Like the first time I read this book, like it was kind of shocking to me that the cop would be the bad guy. Like there's a lot of people out there who would be like, no, that's not shocking at all. What are you talking about, Scott? Of course the cop is the bad guy. Of course he is. But no, the first time experiencing this book, that's the way I felt. And I still have this kind of innate ingrained, like, the authority figures must be listened to and trusted thing that I work through myself. And so it allows me to still like gut instinct of seeing a police officer character in a story, just be like, oh, this is a good guy because cop, right?
Yeah, good guy. And there's something I think almost primal about the idea that he's just like an enormous man, where it's like, it's like if a gigantic man gives you an order, there's a part of your primate brain that's just gonna do it.
Yes, sir.
Like,
yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I'm not proud of that admission, but I think that's kind of how we're wired,
I do love this little bit here as well, as the beginning of this whole thing plays out like a normal traffic stop, and we see basically the cop did a slow, smooth, deep knee bend, bringing his huge and non-committal face into the Jackson's field of vision. A band of shadow cast by the stiff brim of his trooper-style hat lay across his brow. His skin was an uncomfortable-looking pink, and Peter guessed that for all his size, this man got along with the sun no better than Mary did. His eyes were bright gray, direct, but with no emotion in them. None that Peter could read, anyway. He could smell something, though. He thought maybe Old Spice. I love the depictions of this guy. Like, I love the way King describes everything about him. I love the contrast of this big, huge guy with this, like, pink, fragile skin. I love all of it.
Yeah, I love all that too. So somewhere in here, I think actually it's later in the book, but somewhere in these 3 chapters is an overt reference to Cormac McCarthy. I'm not hallucinating this, right? There's an explicit reference to Cormac McCarthy somewhere in this book. I swear to God. So anyway, I mentioned that because it very much made me think of Judge Holden from Blood Meridian. The idea that you've got this gigantic possibly supernatural villainous mastermind sort of character. And also the thing about Judge Holden is that he's like pale and sort of like baby like, despite being like
Yeah.
a gigantic monster. So this guy having like pink and sunburned skin and being sort of vulnerable seeming in that one way really also emphasize my mental comparison with Judge Holden.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And maybe if 11-year-old me had read Blood Meridian before he read this, he would have immediately gone, "Oh, this is the bad guy."
Yeah. Well, and also the thing is, I'm just now realizing this talking to you, but I'm like, I see this character as being bald, and it's like, does the text say he's bald? I literally can't remember. I
I don't
think
think so.
I think I'm mentally drawing him as bald because Judge Holden is bald. I think my brain is just doing that.
Yeah, it's very funny because I think thinking about this now, I think I subconsciously made Judge from Blood Meridian look like this guy. I mean, like I'm just kind of thinking in my mind's eye of like how I like labeled him emotionally in my head as I read that book, and I think it was the same kind of shorthand for those two characters. So yeah, we approached it from the opposite ends, but got to the same place.
That's amazing. I love it.
Peter gets nervous and starts babbling. They're both P and Mary are very scared, and despite the mundanity of a traffic stop, there does seem to be something a bit off about this big boy cop. We see our first use of the word tack, which, well, we don't really know what to do with that yet at all, right? That's just a thing he says multiple times throughout these chapters.
Yeah, it vaguely seemed like something midworldish that I should have recognized, but I don't really remember exactly where I've heard it before, if I even have.
And then you've already mentioned, but the wonderful, "Do you really think that's wise?" response to being an organ donor. Just perfect. I love it.
So some people have said that I shouldn't be doing the audiobook on this one because King's narration is actually quite flat and unaffected, which is true. It is, but I actually kind of think it's a great choice. Like, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt and say it was a choice to read the book in a fairly flat, almost monotone, because like that flatness makes it impossible for me to figure out how I'm supposed to feel about this guy. like because King's not reading his lines as like sneaky or evil or slick or smarmy or any of these things. He's just reading them kind of straight. And if the voice were obviously evil and dripping with venom and so forth, then I would just already know, like, oh, okay, he's the villain. Like, there'd be no tension. But like as it is, I actually really enjoy the sort of guilelessness of the vocal performance, because it is not a performance. It's just leaving me to make up my own mind.
That's interesting. I do wonder why he picked this book in particular to voice. Like, he's done it a few times. Like, I think the one that makes the most sense is On Writing, right? Because that's his autobiography. But I wonder why this book in particular. He's like, no, I should do it. I should do this one. I don't know. I the only one I've ever listened to him is On Writing, so I can't really comment on the quality or lack of in this book itself. I do think, like, I don't know, I love the way King tells stories, like, and I don't mean in his books, like, just like when you hear him in an interview and he's telling stories. I love the way he does that. I think, like, you can see the natural gift of a storyteller and just the way he relays stories audibly to people. So I think I would probably agree that it's not going to be like the best performance. He's not a professional at this particular thing, but there's something like, we've always talked about, like, sit at a bar being relayed a story from your buddy. I think he achieves that affect pretty good, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I know some people were criticizing the audiobook, and it's like, I actually get what you're saying, but I found that I sort of liked that here specifically.
So everything eventually leads to the cop showing Peter that when they last stopped, someone must have stolen their rear license plate. And once again, King is handling like the swing of emotions here. We're like, oh no, it's a cop. Oh, he's pulling me over because of license plate. Oh, fuck, is he a bad cop? No, he's gonna help us, and oh fuck no, like it just
Uh-huh.
the like swing back and forth of the tension, of the release and building of tension here, I think is just absolutely marvelous.
Yep. I love it. It's my favorite.
Are you the type of person that gets extremely nervous around cops? Like as much as I've talked about like my my tendency to defer to them as blindly as authority figures, I also just like get super nervous around them. Like I've only been pulled over for speeding like a couple times in my life, and they've just been incredibly harrowing experiences for me, where both times the cop has commented like, relax, it's just a speeding ticket.
I mean, I think when I was younger, it was definitely worse. But when I would be pulled over, I was pulled over relatively recently, and I had the kids in the back, and it actually made it really easy for me because I was just like, I have to keep it together because the kids can't
Sure,
see me
yeah.
have a meltdown, and that actually just made me keep it together, and it was actually fine. And I like drove away from it like, wow, I handled that really well.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say like extremely nervous. I'm thinking, a couple of weeks ago, I went to my favorite like sub shop, and there was like an entire SWAT team having lunch there with their like, their sidearms, just
Uh-huh.
and it's like maybe a little nervous because part of you is like, what's about to happen,
Sure,
but
yeah.
it's not like I feel like they're gonna go after me necessarily.
No, and that's the weird part about it is like I don't like my nervousness and anxiety at it has nothing to do with like a specific thing of like, oh, this cop is going to attack me or kill me or
Uh-huh,
arrest
yeah.
me. Like it's just, I don't know, it's just like I'm in this situation and it makes me nervous. And like I'm acutely aware of the fact that, oh, if I looked different than the way I look, this nervousness might be taken in a way that makes everything worse.
Yeah.
But for me it doesn't, thankfully. But
I guess
weird.
like one way that makes me nervous is just like my ability to drive gets worse because
Yeah.
if I'm driving near if a cop car is behind me,
Oh yeah.
I become so hyper aware of my driving decisions that I like
Yeah.
can't drive correctly anymore. So that definitely does happen.
Yeah, and my registration is expired right now, so I'm
Oh
also
God.
like acutely aware of cops every time I see them on the road because I'm like, is today the day? Is
Yeah.
today the day I'm gonna get pulled over for my registration being expired?
Oh God.
I need to get on that.
Yeah.
All right, so I really love this. I don't know why like I loved this so much, but like we have the cop kind of see the broken screw that was holding his license plate in place, and it just says the cop tossed the useless chunk of screw back over his shoulders and into the desert, where it would lie undisturbed for 1,000,000 years unless it caught some inquisitive bird's eye. Like I just love the emphasis on like how desolate and empty this desert is, that like you could just throw something off the side of the road, a road that represents civilization, just 5 feet away is a place that a screw will sit undisturbed forever. I just like I
Yeah.
love that depiction.
It's not even just undisturbed by human hands, it's just undisturbed.
Yeah.
It'll just nothing will happen here for 1,000,000 years. Yeah, it makes it feel otherworldly in its vast emptiness. I
Totally.
agree. I love it.
This all culminates in Peter getting the toolkit out of his trunk to move the front license plate onto the back, when he accidentally discovered a giant bag of weed that his sister had hidden in the spare wheel well. And okay, Matt, we see a lot more of the cop after this week. So looking back on it now, we can say that the cop clearly has some power that allows him to know things, and he seemingly like knew probably that the drugs were back there the entire time, and this whole big event was just like him fucking with them leading up to this planned discovery of these drugs. But like what I love about it is in real time, when you're reading it for the first time, it just feels like the worst fucking luck possible. It's just like, shit.
Yeah.
It's great.
It does, and yet you also do get the sense of like he knew that was there. And I think the character has this thought, where the character has this feeling like he knew it was there, and like and also the way he reacts to finding the drugs with like no surprise at all.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
it
he's just
helps.
kind of awkwardly hovering and is like, "Ain't you gonna change that?" And then it's like
Uh-huh.
sits there
Yeah,
and waits.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he definitely planned out the entire encounter from the beginning
hmm
just to lead up to this, and I think he also enjoys the game of letting them feel like they're going to get away and that it's all going to be fine, and then kind of making him nervous again, and then letting him feel relaxed again, and just
yeah,
reeling him in and out, just fucking with them.
yeah. No, I think you're right. He definitely enjoys this, and we get to see through each of these three little vignettes like the ways in which he enjoys it because he enjoys them all distinctly and uniquely from each other.
Yeah, yeah,
So the Jacksons are arrested and put in the back of the cop car. And I love this recurring beat we see, Matt. Speaking of three beats and how everything's repeating, every one of the point of view men we get in these readings this week sit in the cop car, sit behind the cop, and have their legs, like pushed painfully back by the size of this guy. He's pushed his chair all the way back, and even with it pushed back, it's like pushing against their legs. It's all this painful experience that all three of these characters have, and I love the recurring beat of that.
yeah, yeah. It's awesome. I agree.
As they drive off, Mary continues to try to convince the cop that the drugs aren't theirs and there's been this huge misunderstanding. But Peter seems a little bit more resigned to their fate, especially as they drive down the road and he sees more troubling signs. I love when they pass the broken down RV with that little girl's doll out front, and the cop doesn't stop or slow down or do anything. And it's just like more evidence for Peter that, oh no, something's definitely wrong here.
Yeah, absolutely. You get the strong sense that the cop also knows that Peter knows that something is
hmm
off, or at least I did,
Yeah.
where it's like the cop is enjoying the idea of like making him paranoid, and understanding that some kind of game is being played, but not knowing what the nature of that game is. And of course we don't either, which because we're in Peter's position.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's just that's like maybe my favorite thing about this book is King's perfect awareness of like the questions you're asking, like,
Yeah.
basically what the hell is going on, but basically, different versions of that question, like who is this guy, why is he doing this, what's, to what end,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, we've talked about this before, but it is really one thing that he's so incredibly gifted at is like just being able to like have a bead on what the reader is thinking and wondering and wanting in any given moment in his story. Like he's just really good at just like seeming to know that and being able to react accordingly. Like it really is what makes reading his book so satisfying and fun sometimes. Is it seems like the book knows exactly what you want and is giving it to you.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So as they drive, the cop reads them their rights, and thus one of my favorite moments in the book. Like this is such, all the tension and nervousness builds up to this moment where he says, "You have the right to remain silent," the big cop said in his robot's voice. "If you do not choose to remain silent, anything you say may be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney. I'm going to kill you. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand your rights as I've explained them to you?" It's like just the perfect moment. Like it's really like everything's building, the tension, the anxiety, the uncertainty, the what is going on here, what is happening, the trouble these characters are in, and then just buried there in that the Miranda warning we've heard so many times before, just a bomb,
Uh-huh.
and it's perfect. And
Yeah.
the thing I love that Peter's like, I don't think he noticed that he said it, so we can't react to it either. Like it's just like it's so wild.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, all that's perfect, I love it so much.
So from here we move into the town of Desperation itself, and we get another three beat here, Matt. The three beat of the cop taking the right turn into the main drag of town so hard that the car kind of briefly lifts and almost flips. And for some reason, this is also a beat that's repeated another two times with each of the other people that are driven into desperation by our cop. Like, isn't it great that we're just like, I think we're really doing something with this idea of three and this like recurring things that are happening for these three characters.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, some comparisons and contrasts are being drawn. Although
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't get everything I was supposed to get, because it's actually very dense. Like, that's one thing I was saying earlier about the idea of like density,
Hmm.
effectiveness of communication with relatively few words. There's just so much in here where you could read a lot into just like the way someone's reaction is described, and I'm still, still kind of trying to verbalize and unpack some of these things.
Yeah.
I think once we get to know these characters better, maybe some of these things will become more clear.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think a perfect example of this, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but like, we talked about the three beat of all three of the characters being, pushed into their seat by his size and the pain in their legs. And we see that the character of Peter and later the character of Ralph just kind of silently take this punishment, right? They just
yeah,
like, this hurts, and they don't say anything because they are both like me, a person who defers to authority and is like, I'm not going to complain to a cop about how my legs are hurting. And then we see a little bit later with the character of Johnny, the same thing happens. And what does he do? He immediately starts complaining and yelling at this cop. And that is a great way through these recurring beats to define character. These two guys are this way. This guy is a different way. It jumps out at you. You notice it. And there you understand Johnny a little bit more, and you understand Ralph, and you understand Peter.
yeah, yeah.
So I just like, we want the way this town is described, Matt. I pulled this part, but a mile or so farther in, they passed a sign which read, "Desperation's church and civic organizations welcome you." The words church and civic organizations were readable, although they had been coated with yellow spray paint. Above them, in the same paint, the words "dead dogs" had been added in ragged caps. And then we see here that this town is like basically a two-road town. They don't see anyone around. There's a trail leading up to a mining operation off in the distance. We were told that's Rattlesnake number 2, the China Pit. The cop tells us it was just recently reopened, which probably won't matter at all, right?
No.
Um,
There's never just things buried underground that matter in stories.
we also see that 3 bikes are just like put in the middle of the road, turned upside down with their seats on the ground and the wheels spinning. Just normal things you'd see in just a normal desert town.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the kind of thing I would see driving across Texas all the time, for sure.
Finally, they get to the municipal building where the cop repeatedly calls them Jews for some reason, and then asks them where Paul is. See, he's making a Peter, Paul, and Mary joke. Matt, you get it? You get
I
it?
do. The first of much religious language that's going to be used
Oh,
here.
did you catch that? Was
Uh,
I not being subtle in all the pulling of religious stuff I did over the course of the script?
no, I almost missed it, but no, I mean, it's not entirely surprising coming from Stephen King, but
Sure,
yeah,
sure,
there's
yeah.
there's definitely a lot. There's definitely a lot here. Uh, if anything, I think it almost increases as we go. So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
so I wasn't even going to talk about it a ton here, because I think we'll have just so many other opportunities to talk about it.
Absolutely sure. Yeah. So they enter the municipal building, and we see a little girl who has clearly fallen or been thrown down the stairs dead at the foot of them. They say she's about 6 or 7 years old. Peter like almost immediately, connects this little girl to the RV that he saw and the little doll that was left in front of it. We see later this is of course correct, but this is like, everything keeps escalating, right? You tension, and then bam, I'm going to kill you, and then there's more tension because that, and just like opening the door to this building and seeing the corpse of a child just there, right?
Yeah.
Is such a statement that like this is a nasty book. Like this, like truly, this is a nasty book. It is not like Bachman levels of nasty. I do think The Regulators is a bit nastier of a book than this.
Good.
But this is a mean, dark book for sure. Like
Yeah.
again, which I think links up to what your perception of King was, prior to actually reading him. It's all here. I mean, here's a dead kid at the very beginning of it.
Yeah, and the book's, like you said, letting you know in the first chapter what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that unflinching confrontation of horror that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not even the end of the chapter.
No, it's not.
uh,
So our cop kind of goes like, I love the way the cop kind of slowly reveals himself over the course of this. Like, and here, just like it's almost as if the masks are off, and he's like, his reaction to seeing the little girl's corpse is like, oh gosh, forgot all about her. But you can never remember anything, can you? No matter how hard you try. It's just so, it's like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, there's something particularly unnerving about the no matter how hard you try. Like I read that in like a specific voice where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, he's just gone. You know, it's great.
Yeah, I agree. So as Mary screams and tries to run away, the cop pulls out his gun and sticks it in Peter's gut. He says, "I don't care if you're a Jew or a Hindu," the cop said, hugging Peter against him. He squeezed Peter's shoulder chummily with his left hand as he cocked the .45 with his right. In desperation, we don't care about those things much. And then he shoots Peter 3 times in the stomach, and then presumably once more. I think in the next chapter you hear there's a 4th shot, maybe in the head. I don't know. And our protagonist dies.
Yeah.
And that's the end of our chapter.
Amazing. Just an amazing intro to what kind of book we're getting into. There's a dead kid on the floor. Our parent protagonist is murdered out of hand. Just love it. I mean, it's so just briefly on the idea that this is the apparent protagonist, it then makes you reflect on how much characterization you got from Mary. And now we're realizing like, oh, okay, well, she hasn't died yet by the end of chapter 3. So she's probably going to be a more important character. She had a more steel to her than Peter did, actually, because she was the one who was willing to kind of at least try to talk the cop down while they were driving. While Peter just kind of clammed up. So it's not that our attention wasn't on her, but it was like, because Peter was the point of view, we kind of made certain assumptions, and now we recalibrate.
No, totally. I agree. We missed her a little bit, and she kind of rises immediately to the forefront in our next chapter as well. I just like, this is it's such a statement of a chapter. You're like, our protagonist is dead. There's a dead little girl, and we don't know why any of it, right? Like if his plan was to kill Peter immediately the whole time, like why did he go through this whole rigmarole? Like what to what end, to what purpose? And we just don't know the answer to that.
I mean, now we've got 2 bodies on the floor of the I guess the police station. So maybe he wanted it that way. Who knows? Again, we don't know. We're forced to try to put the pieces together, just like our characters.
Yep. All right, so we move now into chapter 2, where we cut over to Ralph Carver waking up in a prison cell in the very same municipal building we just left. Ralph, we learn quickly, is the driver of the RV we saw earlier, and he, his wife Ellie, and son David are all locked up in jail cells. Their youngest, a daughter Kirsten, is the poor 6-year-old girl that was, we learn, pushed to her death by the psycho cop. So that's like, very quickly, like, King is establishing the structure here, right? Is like, okay, now we're going to move over to these people. And from here, we actually flash back in time with them, and learn how they got here.
Yeah. Right. I don't have a specific thesis here. Just wanted to more point out how interesting the structure is overall, that we start with the Jacksons and we move to the Carvers, who were actually captured prior to the Jacksons. We do kind of a flashback. And then we move on to our writer character, so it's like forward and backward, and it's just interesting. I don't know quite what we're doing or why yet, but it is interesting.
So there, we see also there's in another one of these cells, Matt, a man with white hair, but we don't know who that is yet. Even by the end of this week's reading, you could maybe be forgiven for assuming this is Johnny, the writer character, briefly, but it's not, because the way his capture in time takes place after Mary has already attempted to kill the cop with the shotgun.
Yeah, right.
By the way, I do know the name of the cop, and I've like, if you hear me like stopping mid-sentence throughout this conversation, it's because I've almost said his name like 16 times.
That's funny.
Which is weird, because it's not like it matters really. It doesn't. but I don't know. I'm just sticking to like the purity of what you know and what you don't know. But I've almost said his name like a dozen times now.
That's really funny. So I was kind of wondering if this is just going to be one of those books where the antagonist is a nameless, you know, unstoppable machine, and it was just going to be the cop the whole time. But that's interesting. it's,
Well, fuck, I just spoiled that for you. Damn it.
well. I mean, one thing that's interesting about it is the fact that like cops usually have a badge that has their name on it, don't they? Or am I mistaken? I thought they
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
think so.
like,
At least a name
nobody's
badge on
bothered.
their uniform.
Yeah, right. So the fact that none of these characters have checked or have noticed that that name tag wasn't there is also kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Um, what does it say exactly? I'm not sure, but none of these characters have thought to check. Like one of the characters calls him officer friendly, don't they? Like as a
Yeah,
joke, obviously.
yeah,
Um, but even if you come up with a nickname for the cop, it's like, well, why do you need a nickname? Why couldn't you just look at his name tag, right? I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I don't think he has one. Is
Yeah. He must not. But again, it's like they're not
Yep.
noticing the absence of it. So anyway,
Yeah, and he doesn't introduce himself to any of them, which is also a little bit weird. Like you'd assume,
yeah,
like, "Hi, my name is Officer Daly, and I blah 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 blah." Yeah, none of that's
right,
happening.
right, yeah,
All right, so I do. Speaking of the structure that you just talked about, I really do love the way this plays out because we have this like banger of a chapter ending in the last one, and then suddenly we're with Ralph and he's waking up with a pretty serious head wound. He's coming to this realization that his daughter is dead and the rest of his family are in big trouble, and then suddenly we realize that we're just moments after the end of the last chapter, that the murder of Peter just happened, and Mary is suddenly here and she's thrown into the room, and suddenly there's a shotgun, and our characters are screaming at her to pick up the shotgun and shoot the bastard, and everything is just like happening so freaking fast all of a sudden, and you're just like, oh man, I am in for everything this is doing.
yeah. It's very insane and delightful, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
great transition into chapter 2. Actually, the
Yeah.
idea that we end on that really strong bang, and then we just keep the momentum going directly into chapter 2.
Yeah, and it's only in a moment where Mary does pick up the gun that King allows us to like step off the gas pedal just a little bit, because from here we flash back to the Carver family and their van earlier that day, to the events that led them here. So I mean, like, how do you feel? I guess what like the thing is, we don't really know what this book is doing yet, but basically the overall structure of these 3 chapters are someone is getting taken by the cop to desperation,
Right.
drawn into desperation by the story, by the cop. And just like, what do you think of that overall structure? Because it is interesting that, we're 115 pages or so into this novel and we just really have no idea what it's about yet.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's very intentional that we're frantically wondering along with the characters, like, what are we doing? What does this guy want?
Mm,
What is he trying to achieve? The closest thing that I end up with after these 3 chapters is like, this is going to be some kind of game for him where he's gathered these people and he's going to put them through some kind of horrible ordeal or some kind of fucked up Saw type game or something like that to break them, or just for his own amusement, or to make some kind of point, um or perhaps there's just some supernatural thing that's going on that I couldn't possibly guess at because I just don't know, don't know the background. But really, I don't think it's something that can be figured out at this point. I think we're just meant to be in this state of sort of terrified uncertainty along with the characters.
yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. I like it. I just wonder, like, one of the things I'm so curious about when it comes to King is like he does really kind of slow roll his introduction sometimes, where we really spend a long time setting everything up before we start, getting into the meat of what the story is about. And I think it is the same here. Like, this is a long book. I think this is like a 700-page book thereabouts. But still taken over 100 pages to really just begin to set up stuff is a lot. And I wonder, like, I certainly have patience for it and love it, but I wonder how many people like just like, okay, like what is what is this book about? I mean, and I think it almost seems like he knows that and realizes that, and that's why, like, sometimes the pace is just kind of relentlessly forward, even if we don't still know like what the plot is yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. At this point, I see this as being kind of his strength in storytelling is it almost doesn't matter. Like it could all be ad lib, right? Like there's a part of me in a book like this that wouldn't be entirely shocked if you were to be like, hey, did you know that he just wrote all this out longhand in one sitting, and that's the book, and like he didn't think about it beforehand. He just I'm not saying I think that's what happened, but it's like I actually kind of think he's at his strongest when he's just going.
Sure.
So I don't mind when that's how the book feels, you know?
I do wonder if there's a specific time or like moment in his career where he stopped being edited for length. You know, like you get to a certain place, you get to a certain echelon in writing where, certainly your stuff is still copy edited for, structure and like, just for just sentence structure and then larger story structure and what is working and what isn't. But like, early in writers' careers, they're also edited for, hey, we can't make a book this long. Like even Evan King with Stand, right? Like he had to edit that down. It was too long of a book. And he got to a point where he didn't have to do that anymore. And it's definitely now, like definitely here in 1996, he's at that point. I just wonder like when exactly that transition happened.
Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting to look over all the books and try to figure it out. But
yeah. So we meet the Carvers, a family of 4 driving their annual summer vacation from Ohio to Lake Tahoe, where the kids will all go have fun, and Ralph will go gamble. Ralph really likes to go to the casino, Matt. He enjoys it, but don't worry, he's got rules. He's got his ironclad rules. We see here that it says he quits when he either has A, lost $1,000, or B, won $10,000.
Yeah. So, or in other words, keep gambling until you've lost $1,000.
Yes. I'm fascinated by this whole thing. Like he talks to he's talking to his wife and they're trying to decide where they want to go. And the one thing she says to him is like, just don't come asking me for money. And his reaction to that is really interesting. I'd never do that, he had said, sounding shocked, feeling a little shocked, actually. And it does, like, there is an interesting read on this thing of the gambling addiction, like being currently managed, right? But like just there under the surface, we're like, making the comparison to like a functioning alcoholic who is like, he's dealing with his addiction by setting up these rules. And he's like, well, these rules are ironclad. I would never break these rules. But at the same time, like, maybe you would though. Maybe eventually you would. I feel like that's not textual, but I feel like it's there in the depiction of this.
Yeah, there's even something to the fact that he's so shocked by the assertion, where it's like, if she just meant it as a kind of offhand comment, like I can imagine somebody just making that comment without meaning anything by it, but then the fact that he's shocked by it, it's like, well, wait a second, so like, it's you're taking this more seriously than she is.
Yeah.
And that says something too.
He's like afraid that it's a bigger problem than he wants to admit. And like the idea that someone else would like possibly share that problem. Like this is maybe a terrible metaphor to make here, but like when you're worried that you've like packed on a few pounds and then your spouse like makes an innocent comment that she didn't really mean. But like, because you're aware and worried about that, it like, you're like, what do you mean by that? But like, where it's really just reflecting your own insecurity and not anything that they're actually thinking. I think it's exactly that.
Yeah.
So that's Ralph. I also really like the rest of it. I started reading that sentence. I want to read the rest of them. The 2 of them sitting in the kitchen of their suburban home in Wentworth, not far from Columbus, sitting next to the bronze Frigidaire with the magnetic stick-on daisies scattered across it, travel folders on the counter in front of them, neither aware that the gambling had already started. and the first loss would be their daughter.
Yeah, I'm glad you read that out because I wanted to pause on that phrasing, especially the last bit there, because like it doesn't really just feel like a rhetorical flourish. It feels meaningful, but then you ask, well, in what sense have they gambled their daughter? Like, in what sense are they gambling? You know, are because when you say gambling, in my mind, it implies some voluntary risk has been taken. Something is being ventured in order for some gain to be obtained, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, is that what's happening? Are they by traveling across the country through kind of the desert of Nevada? Is that gambling? Are they surely they don't perceive themselves to be taking that kind of risk, but maybe the universe doesn't care whether you perceive yourself to be taking risk. Maybe gambling. I'm just fascinated by this idea of like, what is gambling exactly, and can you be gambling without realizing you're gambling?
Yeah.
This phrasing sure seems to imply that you can be. So
No, that's great. I hadn't dove in, dived, dove, doved,
divin.
div. I hadn't looked at it with that level of inspection before, but I like that. I like that idea, and you know, like just this general, you know, the big thing they're talking about is like, oh, maybe this year we'll go on a different vacation. Maybe we'll go here. I'll go here. I'll go here. And it turns out like what they want to do is just go back to the same place they always go to, and then Ralph gets to go to the casino again and
Yeah.
do that. And there is something, you know, some the force of the cause and effect chain, right? Like, oh, if only you had gone to Mexico, if only you had what is perceived as a more riskier venture, you wouldn't have gotten yourself in this situation.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that they keep wanting to go to the casinos kind of tells you like, okay, he really likes gambling a lot, actually.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, because like there's part of me that I'm so hesitant to read too much into this, but like there's part of me that's like Ralph is the one like suggesting all these other places, and it's his wife that's like, no, 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 we'll go back to we'll just go back to Tahoe. You'll be happy, the kids will be happy, and like part of me wants to read into this is like this psychological game he's playing, where he's like suggesting places he knows she won't want to go, like to get back to the place where he really wants to go. Because like in the context of the scene, it seems like he's totally fine not going gambling this year, not doing the usual thing, like but almost in a level where maybe he doth protest too much type stuff, you
Yeah.
know. I don't know, I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but
Um, I I see what you're saying, and I think it's too soon to say based on what I
yeah,
understand about the character. Not like neither yes nor no, but like
sure,
that's certainly one possibility. And as we get to know the characters better, it might become more clear.
sure, yeah. So, as Ralph drives the van down Route 50, he looks into his rearview mirror and he sees his son, David, there sitting out the window, his Bible with him. And this is when we have to talk about David and religion, Matt. We see here Ralph thought again of asking the kid what he was thinking about, what all this Bible stuff was about. But you might as well ask a post what it was thinking. David, he could abide by Davy, but hated to be called Dave, was a strange kid that way. Not like either parent, not much like his sister either, for that matter. The sudden interest in religion, what Ellen called David's God trip, was only one of his oddities. It would probably pass, and in the meantime, David did not quote verses at him on the subject of gambling, cursing, or avoiding the razor on weekends, and that was good enough for Ralph. So, I mean, there's not too much to talk about David and the religion stuff yet, but I did want to highlight this as like this is kind of being drawn for us as a major character trait of David, and the uniqueness with which his kind of obsession of religion is separate from his parents and isolated from his parents. Like a lot of times, I think religion is kind of imposed by the parent, and then the kid just kind of follows suit naturally. But we're being specifically told here that his interest in this stuff is separate and removed for them, from the point that they're both kind of mildly concerned about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes off as being kind of judgmental to Ellen called David's God trip. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a very superior attitude that they have, where they're like almost rolling their eyes at their son here,
Yeah,
which sort of puts you on the kid's side, actually.
sure. Yeah.
Like almost no matter what you think about religion, the idea that this kid has, he feels some kind of calling or some kind of draw to this, to the Bible, and that his parents are just rolling their eyes about it. It kind of makes you go like, fuck you though. There's let the kid enjoy his thing that he cares about.
Yeah, let him explore and
Yeah.
learn and see if some of this means something to him.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I kind of got a vibe that this kid is going to be something like our hero because of the way he's framed. There's a lot of religious content throughout the story, as we've talked about. There's, including, by the way, of course, the cops' comments about Jews and Hindus and stuff. Like, there's just it's really kind of sprinkled pretty liberally throughout everything, just religious ideas. So now you have this character's kind of the first straightforwardly like pro religion character. It seems significant.
No, I think you're absolutely right here, and you've picked up on what I was trying to kind of gesture towards, that the religious stuff is kind of everywhere, in specific ways and in unspecific ways. Like, one of the things I noticed, that like the idea, Mary and Peter in their chapter, like one of the first lines is like, he thinks he's like really focused on what color the cat was, because he wants to know if it's Satanists out here in the desert doing stuff. So we're very specifically getting a lot of imagery one way or another with this, and I think that will culminate with the cops' conversation with Johnny at the end of the third chapter.
Yep.
So just as he's about to speak to his son, though, the tires on the RV blow, all four of them at once. We learn this is just basically a strip that's been put into the road. But before, like, I want to talk to you about structure again briefly here, because King does this thing, which he does quite often, where we're cutting backwards and forwards in time. But here, I think it's really interesting that we cut from the tires being blown out back to the present, back with Mary and the gun. Then, as Mary picks up the gun, intent on blowing the cop away, we very quickly cut back to the RV and the aftermath of the tire blowout. So we like very, very quickly, over the course of just a couple of pages, leap forward back into the present just to like check in with what's going on with the shotgun and Mary, and then just run back to the past. And it really speaks to me as like King being aware that we need to remind readers of this pivotal moment in the jail cell that's about to happen, and like being very conscious of the fact that we can't jump away for it for too long. Like that, like if you cut the middle jump out and just move directly from the flat tires to the cop showing up, that like we would lose a little bit of the momentum of the sequence with Mary and the gun. I don't know. It just struck me as him once again kind of feeling out what people are wanting and where their attentions are lying, and needing to jump back to that moment very, very quickly. Just, like I said, a page basically.
Yeah.
And then jumping back.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think he's balancing these things. I mean, I think one reason it didn't really bother me that we were cutting away from this action scene was that I just was like, there's no way Mary's going to successfully shoot this cop.
Sure.
Like it's doomed. It's just you're curious to see how exactly he's going to get the upper hand on her, I guess. but at no point did I think that she was going to manage to actually shoot him.
Fair. So back in the Carver's RV, as they slow to a stop, they see a police car rushing up behind them, picking up the spike strip, and then rushing to their car with his gun drawn. The interesting thing about this one is this scene is probably like, I guess, maybe the least tense of our three sequences this week, because not only do we know who the cop is and that he's bad already, but we also know the result of the scene already, right? Like, we know three of them end up in a jail cell, one of them ends up dead. Like, this is all known information, and what it does is allow us, I think we already talked about this a little bit, but pay attention to the cop a little bit more, pay attention to how he's acting, what he's doing, and start to be able to like form a hypothesis for the why of this, because he is just fucking with them here. Like, This whole thing is just him fucking with them. He put the spike strip down. Now he's going to rush up and pretend that they're in clear and present danger, immediate danger. He's got to throw him in his car and cart him away as quickly as possible. This is all just him fucking with them. And again, why? What for? What to what end? We have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, he's having fun for one thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it is clever. Like that's another thing where I don't know if this makes me like him more as a character. Obviously, like it's horrible, but also it's like there's a cleverness to it where it's like, okay, how do you kidnap a whole family in an RV? Like as a cop, how do you orchestrate the situation?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you make it seem like there's a threat, and how do you do that? Okay, you can use the spike script. You can use your authority. You got a story involving some kind of crazed sniper loose on the desert landscape. It's inventive, right? It's not. It's almost more inventive than it needs to be. Like this is what I mean about him having fun. He's like, concocting this creative yarn to lure them in. And it really says a lot about his character that he bothers to do this, right? Instead of just, for example, pulling them over and then just pointing his gun at their face and being like, "Get in the back of my car," which he could also do, right?
Mm-hmm.
He bothers to do it this way
Yeah,
because it's fun
which is
for him.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Totally fascinating.
yeah, right. Um,
All right. So we get to see that the cop knows their name somehow. Like, and this is a wonderful scene that we haven't really seen completely pay off yet. But we're basically like, he says, "Oh yeah, I read it on your house. Like, it was right there when I saw it." And Ralph like has this moment of, "Well, that sits weird with me, but whatever." Um, and
yeah,
and he ushers them into his car, leaving behind poor Kirsten's dolly, and drives them off to Desperation. I do like the kind of the linking image of the dolly left behind, and then Kirsten herself, being the one left behind.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's just good continuity of image there
yeah. I
to
agree.
really turn up the tragedy.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
King writes this next part wonderfully, Matt. I love this whole part where the cop continues with this whole story about the other person there, which we learn eventually is a cop, and it all leads to this wonderful moment of, well, there were two others, but I killed them. But I love how King writes about the smile on the cop's face that Ralph doesn't see but feels in the way he talks, and just this aura he's exuding. It's just like maximally creepy. Just like, I can't get over it. Like, it just feels like he's smiling, and why would he be smiling? Why would he be enjoying this? Oh man, it's so good. Like, and we know the answer to that question, or, well, I mean, we don't know the why, but we certainly know that it's because he's a monster. That's why.
Yeah,
But it still works just beautifully, I think.
yeah, I agree. It's very fun.
Yeah. And I love he turned his head to look back through the mesh, and he wasn't smiling after all. He was grinning. His teeth were so big they looked more like tools than bones. They showed all the way to the back of his mouth. Above and below them were what seemed like acres of pink gum. Now I'm the only law west of the Picos. Man, I love
Such
this.
a good line. Such a good line. I love it.
So back with Mary and the shotgun, Matt, as the cop charges her. You were, of course, correct. Mary fires, but the cop seems to duck right in time, and then he pushes the desk into her, pinning her against the wall. Mary drops the empty gun, and instead of killing her, the cop leads her to a cell, saying, "We're just getting started here." Why? Well,
Yeah.
we don't fucking know.
we don't know. I mean, it's clearly this is just kind of a pattern match that I keep doing, but it's like saying we're just getting started. It's like, okay, so he's like collecting people together, and he's going to put them all through some horrible ordeal or pit them against each other, or some kind of thing that's going to be horrible. Like you already get this is like a mean book. We said, you didn't have to tell me that. I got from the first chapter that this is going to be a mean book. So it's like, okay, well, given that it's a mean book, what can we do? We can take these characters and we can put them in a situation where like maybe only one of them can leave or something, maybe only one of them is going to survive, and they have to choose, or there's all kinds of classic similar stories to that, right? But
Sure.
I could be totally off base. That's just the guess that I kind of feel.
Yeah, no, I like it. It is really interesting because that you're also forced to be like, well, how are you deciding who you're killing? Like,
Right.
you don't want to kill Mary. Mary tried to kill you, and you specifically avoided hurting her, but you obviously don't care about Peter. Why?
Right.
Why? Like, why Peter? Why little Kirsten? Why not why not? Like, how are you
Right.
deciding who you're killing and who you aren't? It seems random and nonsensical, but is
Yeah.
it? We don't know.
And he kills one person from each of the first two groups, but then the third group is one person. So he,
Yeah,
and it's like there's not enough data here for any real pattern. Is the
sure.
point?
Yeah. Yep. I do like we said about like never believing that Mary would successfully shoot him. But I when you mentioned that Mary is a little bit tougher than we maybe gave her credit for in the first chapter, and I think that is the cool part about this, because like I do have this distinct memory of reading this book the first time and just being like, there's no way she's gonna be able to work that gun. And like I almost felt it again this time. Like Mary up until this point had been seen as just like kind of, she just screams and is scared. But then she's able to pick up the gun and fire the gun. And it's not like she misses. It's like, it's that the cop with almost like his some sort of extrasensory perception,
Yeah.
like ducks at the exact right moment.
Exactly. Yeah, you get the sort of almost borderline precognition, or at least like just superhuman reflexes. And almost like he was trying to make it look like she had a chance, just to at the last second be like, nah, you never had a chance. So.
Yeah, because after that moment, like he knows the gun is empty, and Ralph even comments on this, is like, the gun's empty, why aren't you just charging her? Like, and he won't do it, and we don't know why yet. It's all part of the kind of the mystery at the core of this whole thing.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 3, our final chapter of the week, introduces us to our third character, John Edward Marinville, a mid-50s world-famous and 5 years sober author, driving his motorcycle to California as inspiration for a series of essays he's going to write and publish. And Matt, I think the thing that is very obvious right away is that Marinville is kind of the most obvious King insert character here, right? Like, he's world famous, well-known author, recently sober. All these things seem to connect very well. But hear me out for a second here. I kind of think all three of the men we've met and been in the head of today are King, or at least King in like different phases of his life, kind of.
Sure. Yeah, I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah, so we have like Peter, right? We have Peter, the young educator. King, was a teacher before he was published, and was able to work full time. And he's like, scared and excited about exploring the world around him. We have Ralph, the middle-aged family man who has an addiction. We think that there's some underlying addiction with this gambling stuff, but is so far keeping it under control. And then we have Johnny, who and I want to be clear here. It's not like I'm saying John Edward Marinville is Stephen King. I don't think he is. I think at this moment he's older than King, right? But by a little bit. And I think King is more successful, and I don't think King had quite a whirlwind of a young author experience that Johnny Marinville had. But I do think there's some of perhaps King's fear of what he could have been or what he could still become.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of really interesting things that Johnny says here that I don't think are things that King like fully believes, but maybe sort of believes.
Yeah. I think you're right that there's something about him that resonates with King. There's maybe, like you say, shares some of the same fears or concerns that King has here.
Yeah.
I think the thing about Marinville is that there's something simultaneously sympathetic and ridiculous about him. It's as if King can't help but empathize with this guy and his concerns, and he wants us to empathize with the character as well.
Yeah.
But also he wants us to know that he's full of shit in a number of ways, and he's rather grandiose in his beliefs about himself, and and pretty much a blowhard. Like, and maybe he is really talented, but maybe he's not nearly as talented as he wishes he were. And it's very fun, the way the point of view makes us both inevitably like the guy, but also kind of see him, I think, as as flawed, and then that's going to interact, I think, really interestingly with the sorts of things that the cop says to him when he finally meets up with him. So
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like the so casually and just matter of factly is the line when he was arrested for beating up his third wife,
uh-huh.
like entered into the book,
Uh-huh.
where it's just like we just throw it out there and don't really react to it. And I agree with you. Like this guy, he's likable, but he's also kind of a asshole and a jerk, and in many ways just a bad person. And he seems to be in a phase of his life where he's maybe gotten these bad tendencies of his under control, but they're still there. You know, speaking of the full of shit thing you said, one of my like favorite things about this whole thing is that, you know, we're introduced to this concept of what he's doing, that he's riding across America to you know, experience things and write these essays that he's going to collect into a short story collection. And we start this section with him saying, and the best part of it is Terry didn't even realize the idea she gave me, and so I don't have to share any of it with her rather. You know, it wasn't her idea, it was my idea. And then like we go through the scene where she gives him the idea, and it's just her fucking idea. Like it's just entirely her idea. It's hey, get on your motorcycle, ride around the country, write some essays, package them with the old essays, the best of the old ones that you wrote when you were younger. The only thing he does is change the name of it, and the name he changes it to is a fucking terrible name.
Yeah.
Which is Travels with Harley, which is probably the only time in the entire book you're gonna like find me agreeing with our Desperation Police Department officer. That's an awful name. It's terrible.
Yeah. No, it's all more funny in retrospect. It's that like it's funny because when the character's kind of first being introduced, I was like, I kind of took it at face value where you know, we have this idea of like, oh, he's critics think he's the only living American writer of John Steinbeck's stature. Wow, that's so he's like really hot shit. And then eventually you realize like, oh, like one critic
said that one time,
and he's been like dining out on it for the rest of his life, and he's never going to stop thinking about the fact that somebody compared him to John Steinbeck. And this is super important to him, actually.
Yeah, totally.
So,
and these are the part of the insecurities that I think are not like exactly King, but like maybe are things he thinks about sometimes. Like I really love where he says, like, you know, Terry gave him the idea, helped him get the idea that might be his last chance. And it says, oh, not his last chance to publish his work. Shit, no. He would be able to go on doing that as long as he remained capable of A, putting words on paper, and B, sending them off to his agent. Once you've been accepted as a bona fide literary lion, someone would be glad to go on publishing your words even after they had degenerated into self-parody or outright drivel. Johnny sometimes thought that the most terrible thing about the American literary establishment was how they let you swing in the wind, slowly strangling, while they all stood around at their asshole cocktail parties, congratulating themselves on how kind they were being to poor old what's-his-name. Like, I read that, and like, I don't see King thinking that that's him, but I do see King like maybe wondering in the back of his mind, is that me? You know, like the whole reason for making Bachman a thing in the first place was like, are people just publishing my works because of my name now?
Yeah.
And like, is no one telling me that all this stuff sucks now?
Right.
But they're just going to keep on publishing it forever because that's just the way it is. Like, I can see that being a very real anxiety that a very successful author would have.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was actually just going to mention Bachman like the nanosecond you said it. Like it's really a rather extreme step to take, right? To be like, I'm gonna make less money. Why? Because I want to see if I'm really that good. It is a sign of insecurity, and we're all insecure. Like we're a very insecure kind of animal. But like that is what Bachman represents, is Stephen King being insecure about, am I really talented? Am I really the author who they say I am? And so I think, that's being projected into this character for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing he says that I thought was really interesting and kind of maybe reflecting King is, one thing Johnny argues with his first ex-wife Terry about a lot is going back to AA. She thinks he should do it. He says he doesn't need to and doesn't like to. And the thing he says here is Johnny told her he had no intention of spending the rest of his life sitting in church basements with a bunch of drunks, all of them talking about how wonderful it was to have a power greater than oneself, before getting back into their old cars and driving home in their mostly spouseless houses to feed their cats. People in AA are generally too fundamentally broken to see they've turned their lives over to an empty concept and a failed idea. He said, "Take it from me, I've been there," or take it from John Cheever if you'd like. He wrote particularly well about that. And that's one where I don't think King believes that, but I think AA was pretty important to King as he got a hold and a handle on his addiction. But I do wonder if in the back of his mind, he worries about that idea of they've turned their lives over to an empty concept and a failed idea. Getting sober is really hard and the process is really hard. And, you wonder if he has doubts and anxieties and stressors about those kind of things that he's having this character spout here.
Yeah, I mean, probably, but I do also think that there's a kind of hypocrisy where it's you've given your life over to a failed idea too, Johnny. You're like this sort of self-worship, this sort of the cult of Johnny as this great American novelist is also its own failed idea that he is in denial about its own failure.
Yeah, this is why I think some of this reflects King's the worst version of himself, the worst version of what he could possibly be, not necessarily an accurate one-to-one image of who he is or even who he thinks he is, but just I could have gone this route. I think King wrestles with the idea of literary fiction versus the type of stuff he writes a lot, right? And his kind of frustrations with how his type of fiction is perceived and treated by the literary world. I wonder if he's maybe if I'd been like this, I could have gotten this kind of attention, but would that have been ultimately good and satisfying for me?
Yeah. No, I for what it's worth, it does kind of sometimes feel like part of him wants to be recognized as a literary writer.
Yeah.
I think there's enough evidence of this sprinkled around kind of all over the place where he's yeah, I know I'm a good entertaining writer. I want recognition as a literary writer. And because the literary establishment is basically a sort of clique fundamentally, it's not really about quality actually. And I can say that objectively because I'm not really a writer, but when it's your thing, it's very difficult to not see the artistic establishment as being the ultimate adjudicator of who is actually good,
Yeah.
So
it's its own sort of game, certainly. You both the kind of hypocrisy but essential honesty of both hating it and also really wishing you were a part of it, I think is just a very relatable thing.
I was listening to some interviews with and discussions of someone of David Foster Wallace. This is who I was, and it was just interesting because it was he the whole mythos about David Foster Wallace was these high society writers who were all writing for each other fundamentally. And it's interesting because it's so disjoint from the world where you and I spend most of our time, which is reading books that have been written for humans, and and just they live in this totally different environment of what makes a story good and what they're looking for, and it's alien to us actually. But it's interesting as all subcultures are kind of interesting, but it's very obvious from the outside what they're actually doing,
Yeah, no, totally. It's this really fascinating thing. And we're using Johnny to really explore that, I think. And I think it is really great how you can tell the way King looks unfavorably on that type of author through the character of Johnny, because as you said, he's he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
He's both sympathetic and completely unsympathetic. I love Johnny. Great character. My favorite of this bunch we've met so far. Definitely my favorite.
Well, yeah, there's definitely a lot to like about him. I know I came
Mhm.
off as probably incredibly negative throughout this so far, but it's just because I think we're pointing out the specific bits of hypocrisy. But yeah, he's actually kind of the most gunslingerly of the characters, of the POV characters so far.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as he's sitting there in the desert peeing, he sees our old friendly neighborhood giant cop man waiting by his bike. And here we go again. The game that the cop decides to play this time is that he recognizes the world famous author John Edward Marinville and is in fact a huge fan of his. I love this moment. He was with some difficulty suppressing a smile. One thing that hadn't changed over the years. He loved to be recognized. God, how he loved it. And this is the cop doing exactly what he needs to do, right? You know, like by now, this is the third encounter with this cop that we've seen. We kind of know and expect how this is going to play out, that he is specifically fucking with this guy. I love the way in which he's fucking with him, though, which is just feeding directly into his ego. Like even when he starts talking about travels with Harley, which again is objectively a terrible name for anything ever.
Yes.
It's awful. The cop is like, oh yeah, I get it. Like I can see it. Like it's so bold. Like he's just echoing Johnny's thoughts back to him, which I think is again more evidence that he does have some sort of like extrasensory perception or something. Yeah. That he is telling Johnny exactly what Johnny wants to hear, which is what Johnny himself thinks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the level at which we understand this cop to operate, you know, psychically just ramps up.
Yeah,
steadily up to this point where it's like the only reason he knows to say some of these things has to be that he was either just reading Johnny's mind or he just like knows everything about Johnny in a way that's just, you know, implausible.
Yeah. And like it's perfect because it's so unnecessary. Like that's like, you know, you talked about how with the RV family, it's like, how do we get a family of four into my cop car to follow me in this car? Like, how do I do that? I have to invent this grand plot or conspiracy or character or threatening situation to get them into it. And that, you know, it makes a certain amount of sense. At this point, he's already stashed the drugs in Johnny's saddlebag. Like they're already there. He's got him. It's over. This is just to fuck with him. Like just to be cruel to him, just to like kind of set him up, butter him up, only to mercilessly tear him down right before he arrests him.
Yeah. Well, especially because the planting of the drugs is so totally half-assed in this case, where like they both know that he planted the drugs, right?
Yep. Totally. So the whole ridiculous charade though is interrupted by a loud howl, and Johnny turns to find a coyote just standing there, not far away, 50 yards away. The cop, you know, walks out and approaches the coyote, starts talking the gibberish, some of which we've heard before, which is tack, but this time we see tack-a-la, and then the animal like runs off, and we're just like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm pretty sure I remember Allah as being something from Black House, but I don't remember if Tack was in Black House or not. But I'm pretty sure there was a lot of like Allah and Abala and stuff like that. I don't know. Sounds very Black House to me. Might not be. I might be wrong.
Sure. I mean, we'll certainly, I think, have opportunities to talk about this further. But yeah. Okay. So he starts kind of talking about, I think Johnny is unsurprisingly like, what the fuck? You just talked to that wolf in some weird language. What is that? And he goes, oh no, it was just nonsense, whatever. And he says, but it was listening to you. No, it was looking at me, the cop said, and gave Johnny a rather forbidding frown, as if he were daring the other man to contradict him. I stole its eyes, that's all. The holes of its eyes. I suppose most of that animal tamer stuff is for the birds. But when it comes to slinkers like desert wolves, well, if you steal their eyes, it doesn't matter what you say. This is not the first time he's like talked about like holes and eyes and things like this, and it's all building up to this weird, uncomfortable, what the hell is going on here with these animals and this guy.
Yeah. This is some of the most interesting stuff, because sometimes it seems like the cop knows he's crazy, and then he says stuff like this, and it's like he doesn't realize how this comes off.
Yeah.
Like most of the time he has this incredible awareness of the other person's state of mind and what he should say to them, and then he says stuff like this, and it's just absolutely bizarre, right?
Yeah. Yep. So as you mentioned, the half-assed drug planting plays out exactly the way the cop wanted it to, with Johnny, stashing his poncho that's hanging out of his saddlebag. And while he does that, oh look, there's the drugs that were taken from Peter and Mary's car. There they are. And the cop, and as you said, they both know that it was planted, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But in the middle of this whole thing, we get this, Matt, which is the cop drops the act, forces Johnny into the car as wolves howl in the distance, and the cop says, "My children of the desert, the canned toy, what music they make." And that's when you and I have to go, hey, we know that word.
Yeah, I definitely know that word. Although it's interesting because like canned toy means a specific thing, and I'm pretty sure that coyotes are like not literally canned toy, but maybe it's like meant metaphorically,
Right. So the canned toy in Low Men in Yellow Coats were just the low men. In the Dark Tower, that was kind of expanded to be the low men, yes, but also like humanoid creatures with animal heads on them.
Yeah.
And
so maybe all coyotes are actually canned toy.
Maybe, we don't know. We just know this guy's calling them canned toy.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun thing to appear here for sure.
And so then the whole charade over, the cop really turns it on Johnny. And I just want to read this because I find it delightful. "Travels with Harley," the cop said. "Do you know what a stupid name for a book that is? What a stupid concept it is? And to plunder the literary legacy of John Steinbeck, a writer whose shoes you aren't fit to lick? That makes me mad." This is when I point to the worst person you know just made a great point meme.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Yet again, I know this is very wrong of me. That I'm not able to just hate the cop completely for murdering people, but this is just very funny. Like it's just very funny that he screws around with this guy who is kind of relatively harmless blowhard for a while, and then he just nails him, and to plunder the literary legacy of John Steinbeck. Do you know what a stupid name for a book that is? It's great. It's so good. It's very.
It's really great. And again, I think to me, it's just another level of telling Johnny what he wants to hear. Yeah. Only this time it's the things that Johnny believes are just being echoed back to him. Like I think he does believe that this is a shitty idea, and he's like trying to talk himself into it. Like he kind of has kept the name secret. We know he didn't tell Terry the name of the thing, but he tells this guy, and I feel like he thinks this. I feel like it's just having his own internal thoughts echoed back at him here.
Yeah. Exactly. It's his fears now instead of his self delusions that he's been telling himself. But yeah, it's totally still his thoughts. I agree.
And I think you're fine for liking this cop. Look, man, books are for being entertained, and this guy's not a real person, so it's okay to say I'm delighted by this incredibly cruel, monstrous, murderous cop, because he's also funny sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, like that's the thing is that's almost the main purpose of villains, is to kind of give you somebody to do some transference onto. Like everybody loves Hannibal Lecter, but nobody wants to talk about how they love Hannibal Lecter, right? It's like, yeah, he's one of the most popular characters in all fiction. Everybody loves that movie. Nobody really wants to quite say why,
No, we just say he's so fun to hate. And I was like, yeah, I agree, but also he's just fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's admit these things. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So yeah, he takes him into the car. The cop walks off to take his motorcycle out into the middle of the desert and then cover it with sand. But he's left Johnny in the car with a brand new piece of technology, Matt, a cellular telephone.
Amazing.
There's something so adorable about how King writes about this newfangled cell phone device,
Uh-huh.
right? Like how he has to be almost meticulous and very specific about showing, oh, you have to move up the antenna, and oh, the bars, how many bars you need, and what roaming services. And then we have to see Johnny navigate the contact menus bit by bit.
Uh-huh.
It's just so deliciously 90. It's like a person is writing about this stuff knowing that his audience maybe only has a vague understanding of like how these things work still.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's kind of adorable. Like you just wouldn't write a cell phone scene like this
No.
in 2023. You just wouldn't.
No.
Like not even because you probably have a signal, but just like the detail of navigating the menus and pressing the buttons and all these things. Like it just, you wouldn't do it.
Because the cop wouldn't have left him with the phone anyway, right?
Well, yeah, true. The cop would have taken away his phone first off, but yeah.
It's only an interesting plot device because it's like plausible.
Sure.
It's plausible the cop would have not realized that he had a phone. I mean, I guess that's one thing that makes it interesting is we're actually left to wonder, like, does the cop know that he has this phone? Because the cop seems so with it, like sort of like flawlessly aware of everything that's happening. Are we really to believe that Johnny has really pulled one over on him and is actually making this call, unbeknownst to the cop, or is it actually just the cop is letting him do this so that he can screw with him yet again?
Yeah, no, great point. We just don't know. It does feel like the first moment in the entire book that our characters have had an advantage on the cop.
Yeah.
And is that a real advantage or just another part of his whole game? We don't know.
Yeah.
But he does manage to get a hold of Steve Ames, the guy who we learn is working for him, kind of like a guy who's running support that's traveling slightly behind him, but is there to help him if he needs anything. He gets in contact with Steve, but the connection's no good. He tells him where he is and everything that's happening, but it's very unclear if Steve got any of that. We just kind of leave this section not knowing. But also, like, I think you can be like, well, he's not just gonna like just okay, the end of that little plot. Like it's gonna pay off in some way, right? Like I feel like it's safe for me to say the fact that we're probably gonna see the character of Steve Ames again, probably.
Yeah, I feel like I made that assumption.
Okay.
But like, in what capacity? At what point? Is this a the cavalry comes in at the very end of the book after it's like too late, or is this a
Sure.
this character is gonna immediately start trying to figure out what's going on?
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
So they drive off, and for the third time this week, we head back towards the town of Desperation. We pass the abandoned RV again. We do the sharp right turn once again, and then we get this. You have never written a truly spiritual novel, the cop told him. He spoke slowly, enunciating each word with care. It is your great unrecognized failure, and it is the center of your petulant, self-indulgent behavior. You have no interest in your spiritual nature. You mock the God who created you, and by doing so, you mortify your own pneuma and glorify the mud, which is your sarx. Do you understand me? So, Matt, there's some theme stuff here, right?
Seems like it. And I mean, one thing is like, part of me feels like this is the first time we're actually hearing the cop's voice or something. There's something different here, right? This is not. This is not actually. This didn't strike me as just messing with him for fun, to get a rise out of him, to laugh at him. This seems like an earnest, like, disgust welling up within him, and the way he communicates it and so forth.
Yeah.
The other thing to say about all this is that it is not midworld gibberish. Pneuma, we all know pneuma directly from its relation to our word for breath, but in a spiritual sense, pneuma refers to the vital spirit or the soul or the creative core. And then sarx, I didn't actually know the word sarx, but I knew pneuma was a word, so I figured sarx probably was too. Turns out sarx refers to the body, specifically the soft, fleshy parts of the body. So I guess you could say anything that's not bone. So these are, highly specific spiritual concepts that this character is using that they're quite unusual concepts. And I
Yeah,
thought that was interesting.
yeah, differentiating the concept of the soul with the concept of just the flesh that makes
Yeah.
up you. Like, I mean, like, I think he even goes into like the difference between soma, which means body, and sarx, which means like flesh,
Yeah.
as two distinct different concepts. And that this really, like, again, in this novel that, as you have correctly pointed out, seems to have God imagery and spirituality and religion like everywhere, like sprinkled in just about everywhere so far. We cap this week with this kind of declarative statement of, your biggest problem, Johnny, is you are not spiritual. You have never written a spiritual novel. You do not believe in anything beyond yourself, and you only satisfy the flesh of your body and never the soul or spirit of your body.
And I also can't help but ask, following on our other conversations about Johnny as a kind of proxy for King, do you think that King worries that he has never written a truly spiritual novel? And then follow-up question, is Desperation an attempt to write a truly spiritual novel?
I don't know.
Discussion questions for future weeks, I think.
I mean, yeah, I mean, those are great questions. And I mean, we do a lot of putting words into the author's mouth already. So do I feel like he thinks that? I don't know. I feel like he's written about spirituality and spirit, like, and has written many spiritual novels. But like, do I think in the deep dark recesses of his mind where he battles with his insecurity, does he worry about the fact that he's never truly done that? I could see it. As to your second question, yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's possible to have written a whole bunch of novels that struggle with religious themes, and then maybe still kind of worried that you've never quite touched the ineffable, the nameless thing that you're trying to gesture at. That people read your beautiful attempt at expressing something divine, and then they say, "Great vampire novel, man." And then you're like, nobody understands. Like, there's got to be some of that, right?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And yeah, we'll see if Desperation is attempt to really dive into that more specifically. I think it is certainly an assumption that can be made from just the plethora of religious imagery peppered throughout these 3 chapters. And we have a character who is almost like specifically pointed out as being anti-religious. Like, he says the problem with AA is this idea of these people who have to, be deferential to a power greater than their own, which doesn't even have to be like God specifically, but just some power, some force that is bigger and greater than your own. And then we have in the character of David, a character who is very specifically very religious, very spiritual for a reason we don't fully understand yet. But the pieces are laid there, certainly.
Yeah. Yep.
And an antagonist who seems attuned to those same ideas, right? Like, this is an antagonist who like sees importance in that central idea as well.
Yeah. Yep. I'm really excited to see where we go with all this, by the way. It's just like reaffirming that I really love this pick.
It's so cool. Like, the one phrase that I really want to talk about, and I don't remember exactly which chapter it comes in, is that I want to spend like 30 minutes on. It's coming. And it's like the thesis statement of this whole book. And it's the coolest exploration of the stuff that I've seen. And I just can't wait to talk to you about it.
Awesome.
Yeah. So as they drive into Desperation, the cop keeps his shotgun trained on Johnny magically. He's looking forward, and yet the gun is following Johnny as he moves around the back of the car. Then we see the cop sneeze, and a bunch of like blood and tissue and grossness hits the windshield. And this goes along with what I think throughout this chapter we've kind of maybe become more conscious of the fact that This cop doesn't look great. Like we emphasize the pink skin, but then Johnny notes blisters and like heavy breathing. And now with this, it really seems like our bastard cop is kind of rotting from the inside.
Yeah. Or, either really sick or like, I mean, one thought I had was that he's just dead and that he's like, undead rather.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, who knows? Infected with something could literally be an alien parasite. Actually,
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many possibilities. I'm really enjoying how open ended things are and how mysterious. Like that's just a really fun start for this book.
Yeah. I mean, like it's a thing that I don't specifically remember how long we kind of hold this stuff before we start diving into it, but I'm enjoying it too a whole lot.
Yeah. And like I feel like there's so much about the character that makes me feel like maybe this was just some guy, this was just some dude, and then like something happens to him, and now he's different, which is why I keep reaching for like he's possessed by something or he's infected by something or whatever. And again, like maybe part of that is this weird sort of wishful thinking I have around this character, where it's like there's some reason why this is happening to him. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We will certainly have many opportunities to find out, though, because as we finish this chapter, they turn back into desperation. Johnny sees coyotes lined up along the side of a road. It's described as like almost an honor guard that are waiting there to present the cop into the town. And as he drives by, they peel off and go back into the desert. Just this really wonderfully creepy image where you're just once again like, what the fuck is going on?
Yep.
And the cop tells Johnny that school is in session and he's about to learn some stuff. And that is how we end this week's reading.
Yep.
As you said, lots of questions, not a whole lot of answers.
And I couldn't be happier.
Well, that's great. I'm so happy you're enjoying it so far. I can't wait. These next two chapters, I think, are going to be a lot of fun because, we're covering chapters 4 and 5 to finish off part 1 of the novel next week. Another pretty lengthy, I think it's another 100 pages, Matt, before we get to the end of part 1. So all lengthy right. Read, but I just had like, this is the only way, because I don't like splitting amongst parts either. This is like the only way I could fit this stuff in a reasonable length.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So that is it. That is the first 3 chapters. That is the beginning of Desperation. Before we go, we have the triumphant return of the discussion question, Matt. It's been a few weeks since we've done these as we were covering the adaptations of it, but they're back.
Yeah.
And what do we want to know from the people this week?
This week, the discussion question is, what is your favorite traffic stop in fiction?
Maybe we should open that up to be like police interaction in general.
Yeah.
I'm trying, because I thought that was a really good idea, and then I was sitting here thinking, I was like, how many like traffic stops are there in stories?
I mean, what's funny is I feel my brain is like, oh, so there's so many, Scott. There's so many, and then I'm like,
you reach for specifics, and you're like,
yeah, right, exactly, yeah. I think it's fine. Yeah, if you can't think of a traffic stop, just any police interaction, sure. Yeah.
And what does that say about the police and about people? And like, there's a lot of things that I think King is doing with this that we mentioned today, but certainly other people are as well.
Yep.
All right, folks, that is it for us this week. Oh, we're so glad to be back on the book read, Matt. As you said last week, I really enjoyed watching those movies, but there's nothing quite like diving into a book in this level of detail. 100%. Glad we're back.
Yep, me too.
As we said, next week we continue with chapters 4 and 5 of Stephen King's Desperation.
And remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com, over on x.com at kingslingerspod, and of course at reddit.com/r/toothmedia, probably the best place to answer that discussion question and to just hang out with all the other listeners.
I appreciate your committal to x.com.
I don't think it's going to go back to being Twitter, so I might as well just
it's not.
Accept it.
It's not. Of course, please subscribe to Kingslingers if you haven't already. This is a great time to do it as we enter the 90s and a new book. You could find us basically anywhere there are podcasts. We're at all of them.
That's right. And if you like any of our shows and you want us to support them, then please consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. As Scott said earlier in the show, we just released our episode on Pet Cemetery adaptation, and that was an intense viewing experience and a fun conversation.
It was great. Of course, if you cannot afford to support us on Patreon, we totally understand. There are and remain many ways to help us out, including sharing the podcast and leaving a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Anita O from Audible. Anita gives us 15 stars and says, long days and pleasant nights. When you want to nerd out on something and that something is too obscure that you don't have anyone to nerd out with in this level of the tower. That's our show for Anita, which that is 100% accurate.
Yep. That's the perfect characterization. I agree.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for us this week. Thank you, Anita, and thank you everyone who continues to send in those rating and reviews. We've gotten some new ones over on our friends at Apple, but we're still working through these wonderful Audible ones because for the sole reason that I get to say 15 stars. That's really it.
Yeah. No, I love the sound of it. Never get tired of it. When we go back to 5, I'm going to be like, oh, 5.
Can bump that up for us a little bit there.
Yeah, I guess that's okay.
All right, folks, have a good week. Have a happy Thanksgiving to our listeners in the States. It is Thanksgiving Day as you were listening to this, probably. You're probably either pissed off because you're driving to work, or you're out on a walk because you couldn't stand your family anymore. Or
I like to imagine that they're sitting at Thanksgiving dinner with an earbud in, and their uncle is telling them a story about work, and they're going, with us talking in their ear.
Yeah. Uncle wanting to talk about the January 6th event and how it wasn't that big of a deal.
Okay.
Oh my God. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.